Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the University of Minnesota Extension Small Farm Land Access Program. This program came about due to an increase in interest in people wanting to become farmers but having trouble finding land and resources to access land. So at the end of this webinar, we hope that you can take away some valuable resources to help you in your farm journey. My name is Emily Hansen, and I'm the local horticulture extension educator in Wright, McLeod, and Meeker counties. And I helped to plan this event along with Karen and Suzanne, and I'll let Karen introduce herself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Karen Johnson. I work with Emily in Wright, McLeod, and Meeker counties with the University of Minnesota Extension with the focus area of livestock.
And then Suzanne, who is our speaker today. Suzanne, would you like to introduce yourself too?
Sure. I am Susanne Hinrichs and I work in the agricultural business management team. I'm based out of the Brainerd regional office.
Just some housekeeping items before Suzanne starts the presentation this evening. We really want you to ask questions, but we want to make sure that we see your question. So as you can see in the red circle there, please insert your questions into the Q&A box, and we'll answer them as we go along. So just feel free whenever you feel like you have a question during the presentation, we'll stop Suzanne and then we'll get that answered. Also, for chatting, please use the chat box, which is also circled at the bottom there, if you need any computer or Zoom assistance. And if Suzanne has any questions that she would like to learn from you, put your answers into the chat box. Another housekeeping reminder is that this session is currently being recorded. And it will be sent out next week along with all of the resources and the links that will be talked about this evening. We all have your email, so we'll send that out via email. And with that, I will let Suzanne take it away.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for having me here to talk about this subject, which is a really important subject. We know that there are a lot of people in Minnesota who are interested in farming and being a part of the food system, providing healthy food to their neighbors and their communities. And access to land and small farms is a challenge. And we're going to talk through some of the ideas that we have to share with you, but then also hopefully some resources that will give you your next steps or some ideas for your next steps. So like we talked about, Karen and Emily are here as my partners in crime, and I'm going to be presenting, but if you have any questions or any things as we go along, put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them as we can throughout the presentation. And then I will be asking you for some input, and I'll tell you when I have those questions come up on the screen. We'll be using the chat function for that, like Emily was saying. So I'm Susanne Hinrichs. I'm an extension business management, agricultural business management educator. And I just want to make sure, Emily, we do have it being recorded, right? I couldn't tell.
Yep, we're good.
All right, sounds good. So part of our work is really focused on agriculture, but that business side, making sure that people are thinking about record keeping and taxes and all those really fun pieces. Access to land and small farms is a topic that is really important right now, especially with the statistics that we learned in the most recent census of agriculture. We know that the average age of farmers in Minnesota is 57.1 years of age. We are having a time where farmers are starting to think about what's next if they're currently farming, and hopefully that brings opportunities for others to either start farming at their existing farms or create new opportunities for farming. In Minnesota, in the last census of agriculture that the USDA did, it showed that there were 11,274 young producers in Minnesota. Young producers are people that are 34 years of age or younger. I would actually say that there's more than this. in Minnesota. We know that there are a lot of people who are doing large scale gardening, maybe in their backyard, participating in farmers markets, other things that where they maybe weren't counted in this. So there are a lot of people that are looking for opportunities in farming, and thank you for being here for this important topic. So let's start out with a question. So in the chat function or in the chat feature, if you would, please kind of start to say, tell us, why do you love farming? Why do you want to get into farming? If you're not currently farming, why do you want to get into farming? We know it's a really great lifestyle. You can farm alongside your family. You can create your livelihood right where you live. There's a lot of really great things involved with farming. We know that farming also allows you to be involved with your community as you get connected in farmers markets or other ways. Someone's already put high quality food. Exactly. You know where your food is coming from. You know the quality of that food, and you can share that with other people in your community. So as you go ahead and please continue to use that chat feature to put why you love farming and why you want to get into farming. So here comes some answers. I love being close to the land and learning more about ecology, the way things grow. It's true, because you are close to the land, raising food, maybe raising livestock, you learn about how things are growing and that environmental piece. Quality of life being there for your family. It's so true. So keep them coming in, and we'll check back on them too, learning more about the soil and the sustainable food system. Thank you for that. Keep them coming. So today in our webinar, we're going to cover these topics. We're going to look a little bit into record keeping. We're going to talk about how you can build your knowledge and things to think about for that, how to start planning for your land access and small farms access, ideas for finding land, options for renting or ownership, and the types of property ownership. We're also going to talk just a tiny bit about business structures that might be advantageous for a new or beginner farmer. So record keeping, that's the first topic that we're going to dive into. Why record keeping? Record keeping is really important for a lot of reasons. I mean, if you're large scale vegetable gardening, let's say in your backyard, you want to maybe move into a bigger space. Maybe you need to work with an incubator farm, or maybe you need to work with a farmer who might have some space. Having those records to show that you have grown things in the past, maybe it's your first year of growing, those are important things to be able to demonstrate and show. And it's through record keeping that you get to have that history and provide someone with, look, I have been growing things. Even if it was just for your family to consume vegetables, keeping those records is really important so that you're able to show someone in the future, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been successfully navigating large scale gardening, and I know how to do this. Maybe it's raising hay. Maybe it's crop farming. Maybe you're working for another farmer and it's on their farm, but yet you can keep records showing what you've been involved with and how you've raised something. So record keeping is really important. It's also really important if you're raising livestock, knowing your lineage and knowing the animals that are born to which animals and keeping track of all that when you've sold them, when they've been born, if they've gotten sick. All that is involved in this record keeping that is not only important for you as a farmer or a future farmer, all those things are important as you build your farming history. So crops, it's the same thing. If you are planting crops, keeping track of what you've planted, when it was planted, when you had rains, all of those things kind of fall into line here so that you can, over the years, have a really good sense of your record keeping and of what you've been doing as a farmer. So if you have sales and if you are selling things, keeping track of sales, that's an important piece. Quantities that you've produced, anything that you've given away, keep track of that as well. all of these things kind of build your persona as a farmer so that you can be telling your story to someone else when it comes time to maybe be working with a banker or a farmer who is working with you on land access. So keep all that in mind. Farm records are really important. They do, like I've been talking about, they prove your track record. They show that you have the oomph to be able to make this go. You've learned how to raise things. I mean, the first few years, a lot of times you're learning how farming goes. And then you kind of get good at this works in our farm, this works in our garden, things like that. You'll need to be able to, as you are looking to move into maybe a new farm or a bigger location, be able to talk with lenders and bankers, and all of those records are an important piece. So I think I've covered most of this. I'll kind of go on to including in that record keeping piece is that growth mentality, knowing that you've been able to start something, you've been able to grow each year and build on what you've learned. All of that shows that you have a growth mentality. And that really is what farming is about, not about necessarily growing produce or raising livestock. It's your own growth mentality that you've learned things, you've built on that, you've been able to put yourself out there to learn new ideas, and then you've implemented new things and innovations. So putting into practice what you learn is also a part of starting small and then growing into a little bit bigger and then finding your maximum spot. And then I just suggest a couple ways for you to find your growth mindset would be, if you aren't farming currently and you want to get into farming, talk to a farmer, the kind of farming that you want to do. Let's say it's large scale farming. Let's say it's crops. Try to find someone that you can relate with, that you could maybe work for, learning how they do things and what works for them. You could start at a community or a neighborhood garden. That also puts you in the proximity of other gardeners just to learn from them. So if you haven't yet started any of a growing situation, consider that. Incubator farms are a fabulous way to be able to get some experience. Extension, University of Minnesota Extension, and other organizations put on field days. So start attending those. Those are important to give you ideas and bring you into new information. And then just in general, start associating with people that you want to be like. So those are farmers that you want to emulate, or someone that you want to get to know them, and then start associating with them. So starting planning, that's another next step. And planning is different than growth mindset or planting. You might be doing some planting. It could be that you are currently making hay and you're raising some livestock. Thinking about what your planning is for your next steps is kind of what I'm getting at here. Where do you want to farm? Does the soil matter of what you want to grow? Maybe you really want to expand your operation and you want to raise a whole field of garlic and next to it a bunch of pumpkins. What is the soil that you need? Do you need irrigation? Things like that. Thinking about that and helping to identify what parts of the state or the Midwest that you want to be in. Is there a location that you are interested in? Is it close to family? Maybe it's not close to family. Maybe it's close to your market. Thinking about how far you can be from your market. The farther you are away from a market, sometimes you can find cheaper land. So kind of weighing the pros and cons for all of those decision-making factors, that's a part of planning where you want to be. And maybe sometimes it happens because you've been able to talk with someone, you've met someone, they have an opportunity, and that's how it works out. So maybe you don't have some of these choices, but thinking about what kind of farm and farming you want to do is a part of this planning process. And also, does your family need housing? Are you going to be moving to where you're going to be farming? All right, do you need housing? Does that housing need to be on the farm? Can it be nearby? Those are all really important considerations. And we know that buying land, if that's your ultimate goal, you know, that is expensive. So start saving now. Start saving each month if you can. Just a little bit at a time does add up over time. So start planning your finances in that way as well. So one thing about soils, if you are already farming, or if you're looking at a farm and you want to kind of gauge how the soil is, U of M does have a soil testing lab. It is easily found on the internet. Here is the website for the soil testing lab. You take about a cup of soil, you send it in a Ziploc, and they will send you a lot of information that's key from the lab for you to know what your soil is like. It'll tell you some of these pieces about texture and the pH of your soil and how much organic matter you have in the soil. So consider getting a soil test. A lot of people do soil tests in the spring before they plant, but this is also a good time to do a soil test so that you can be planning over the winter. So consider that. And another part of planning really is about business plans. So I'll skip to the next slide and I'm going to come back. Business planning involves all of these areas of concentration, really kind of understanding what your description is of your business that you want to have, or maybe you do have a farm, describing what you sell, who your customers are. All that business description is important. Operations of your production, how you produce your goods. Maybe you have a large scale vegetable garden and then you do have a pumpkin patch. Talking about both of those things and writing it up in a written document, in a business plan, that's important. These things are important for you to know, but it's also important for you to be able to say, I have a business plan, and this will explain a lot of what our business is or what we want to do. Thinking about marketing, how you're going to sell your products, that's an important piece to think about when you're business planning. And then who's your managers? How are you making decisions? Things like that. That's an important thing to include in your business plan. And then financials. So here again comes your record keeping and thinking about the financial records that you can have available in your business plan so that you can prove that you are doing a good job of managing your funds and keeping things going on that business side of the farm. So extension, U of M, University of Minnesota has something called Ag Plan. It's an online portal that you sign in. You can actually have multiple people that you're working with. Let's say you and your sister are planning your next steps in your farming operation. You can both log into this and make changes, add to it. It's a really dynamic way to be able to create a business plan. And so I wanted to make sure that you knew about this so that you can use this as a resource. On the bottom of this screen, it says we're going to be hosting a few business planning workshops that are going to be in person over the winter in Minnesota. So we haven't yet announced the schedule or the locations, but that's going to be happening. We also will be doing some virtual business planning workshops. So I'll send some links, and Emily and Karen are going to be putting links in the chat so that you can pull things out if you are interested in any of these resources along the way. And we'll be sending out a resource guide after the webinar as well. Emily, are there any questions that I should look at right now, or are we good for right now? What's your thought?
We're all good with questions we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so all right, here's another question for the chat. So a lot of people had responded to our earlier question. Could you let me know, have you started a business plan yet? Have you been thinking about it? Have you started writing some things down? Maybe you even know about Ag Plan and you've been using that. So if you have a business plan and it has been a good thing for you, and you've maybe used it with a banker or a lender, let us know that. So if you could put some messages in the chat, that would be great. Okay, so let's get into ideas for finding land. I mean, I know that, this is a challenging question, and we want to make sure that we kind of hit on this so that we give you some ideas of how to access land. So this first bullet is kind of intuitive, but it's also backwards. Start farming now if you aren't already. So back to the idea of planning. If you aren't yet farming, but you want to be, consider, going to work part-time for a farmer to learn the ropes, help out at a farm. You can even volunteer if your finances or your family can do that. So consider farming, whichever way you can do it. If you're already starting to farm on your own, wonderful. That's great. Consider word of mouth. So if you're farming with someone, it could be that you're a hired hand for them. You're doing a lot of the work on the farm. It could be that they don't have someone who is a next generation farming with them. That's how you maybe develop relationships with existing farmers. So that's one way, word of mouth, making sure that if you want to live in a certain community, let's say you want to live near your aunt and uncle and they live in a community where you want to be, ask them to help spread the word. So that's a really great way. Word of mouth is a really positive way to connect with a potential farm or maybe even finding land. It could be that a farmer doesn't farm all of his land. Maybe there's access in some of the corners or places that you'd be able to farm. Consider, driving around the countryside where you want to be and then connecting with farmers that way. If you're in a position where you can purchase land, of course, considering working with a realtor, that's a way to do this. Land often is sold through realtors or at auction sales. So those are two ways to consider looking at land. If you're not in the market right now, it still helps you know what land is being sold, what prices are, things like that. And if you go to auction sales, then you get to meet new people. So that's a good way to connect with people too. The Farm Service Agency, every county has a Farm Service Agency or at least an office. So Minnesota Farm Service Agency serves Minnesotans and they know their farmers. And so if you get to know your Farm Service Agency, it could be that you'd be able to develop a relationship with someone there and they might start to think of you as a resource. If a farmer comes in and says, oh, I'm really getting tired of farming, I'm looking to transition in with a new situation, it could be that they would mention your name. So, all these types of resources really help. I know it takes time and it takes a lot of effort, but they sometimes pay off, all those connections. You could consider getting a plat book. A lot of counties produce a plat book, which shows who owns what land. And there is a program called the Conservation Reserve Program. It's not easily found on plat books, but if you drive by a field that doesn't look like it's being farmed currently, you would then be able to figure out who owns it by getting a plat book. So that's a way to do it. There are also GIS records online. So if you're savvy on your computer, you could probably find that information out going to that county and then looking up the GIS records. And I would just say getting to know farmers and potentially cooperatives. Sometimes farmers go together working on a marketing cooperative. Maybe it's a creamery, maybe it's a grain cooperative. Whoever or however you find out about a cooperative, that's also a really great way to meet farmers. kind of getting involved and knowing about that cooperative. So consider getting to know farmers and being in the same places as farmers.
Suzanne, we have two
Yes.
questions for
Okay.
you. The first one is, are there auction sale websites?
There are, and that is kind of complicated because there isn't one clearinghouse for auction sale websites. You have to kind of get to know who is doing auction sales in that area, and then you can go to their website. So that's the best way. Starting to pay attention. A lot of times they hang flyers in cafes or at places where farmers are hanging out, maybe at the co-op, things like that. And then you get an idea of who is doing the auction sales in that area, and then looking on their website for the auctions. Sometimes they're online auctions too. So that is a thing too. Might be a auction sale that's happening at that farm, might be selling some machinery along with maybe the house and the land. But there could also be online auction sales too. That happens as well.
The
And I
next,
don't know. Go
sorry.
ahead. Go
The
ahead.
next question is, can you find land on a regular website like realtor.com or its peers?
Yeah, you can. You can. It's always nice to be able to have a realtor kind of looking for you as well. But you're right. You can find land, just bare land on websites like realtor.com. It is possible.
And then the last question is, does land need to be zoned agricultural or can it be some other type of zoning?
Well, zoning would be something you'd want to work with the county on. You're right. It would be best to have it already be agricultural. That's the best. So yes, agricultural zoning is an important piece of agriculture. And you'd want to make sure that it is zoned agricultural so you can be getting the least amount of taxes, not being charged a commercial amount, and that you can actually farm on that land. Yep, important. Thank you for those questions. Okay, so this is a list of places that you can consider looking for land. So we've already answered some of these in the questions, but getting to know accountants and lawyers, if you have a connection with someone who might be working with farmers in their business, that's a way to let them know by word of mouth that you're looking to either get into farming or to expand your farm. So just mentioning it to people, keeping them apprised of what your situation is when they have a farmer that is wanting to potentially transition out of farming, then they might think of you. Minnesota Department of Agriculture has the Farm Link line that also connects farmers together. So consider that as a resource. Farmland Access Engaging Landowners Group. So this is a really dynamic group that helps put together resources for both farmers who want to sell their farm or want to potentially find a new operator. Maybe they don't want to sell their land, but they want to transition out of actively managing and farming. So that's matched up with people who are looking to start farming or want access to a farm. So the Farmland Access Engaging Landowners Group is one that you can look up online. And I think Karen and Emily are putting some links in the chat. Also, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture has a beginner farmer program, and I'm going to talk about that in a future slide. Consider attending farm tours, like we talked about earlier, field days and farm tours. Get involved in that way in farming. And then I think it's really important to become involved with farming advocacy groups such as Farmers Union, Farm Bureau, Minnesota Farmers Market. Those are all places that you can meet other farmers and make some connections. So being active also helps you know what the issues are within the farming community. Okay, so options for renting and owning property. So we're going to talk a little bit about renting and owning. I know that renting is probably the first step in farming, because that's an easier way to get into without that large upfront cost. So Extension, University of Minnesota Extension has quite a bit of resources on renting. So if you are considering renting land, there are ways to be able to get to know. Let's say you've met someone at a farmer's commodity group, and you guys have struck up a conversation, and it's going to work out after you've gotten to know each other that you're going to be able to farm some of that person's land. You'll want to have an agreement. You know, handshakes are really great, and they're important to be able to get to know that person. But in order to protect both parties and to really set up ahead of time the things that you've defined as what's going to happen in that agreement, maybe how much you're going to pay, things like that, it's important to have a piece of paper that's a rental agreement. So U of M Extension has example contracts for land rent agreements on our website. We also do a lot of land rent webinars and workshops across the state. So we'll share resources in our resource guide when we follow up so that you know how to find that information. You might be at the point where you're not looking for, let's say, an existing farm. You want to get into an incubator farm and start honing your knowledge and your skills of gardening or farming. So those are really great opportunities too. There's quite a few urban areas that have farming incubator farms, and they have established lease agreements of how much you're going to farm and how much that would be. So those are really nice to enter into because it's all set up for you. You don't have to make a whole lot of decisions. You just know that you're going to be working at that incubator farm. So consider when you're thinking about renting and having some rental agreements, not just a handshake, but really make it kind of formal with the rental agreement. We really encourage that. So I mentioned a little bit ago that Minnesota has a beginner farmer tax credit, and this is an incentive for a person who owns land to rent it to a beginner farmer. So a beginner farmer is someone who has been farming 10 years or less, and it's a tax credit for the person who owns the land. So this is a Minnesota Department of Agriculture program. Funding is limited, but it's on a first come first serve basis. It's important though to consider this as an option because it really helps that ownership, the person who owns the land, to be able to get that tax credit. And it's an incentive for them to work with a beginner farmer. So here's some information about it. And it just gives the different limits of what you can have as a beginner farmer on your sales and other things. But the beginner farmer, in addition to renting the land from an existing farmer, also agrees to go through some educational programs. And there's quite a few that are listed on the Minnesota Department of Agriculture website that qualify. So if you're willing to kind of go through some educational programs and in order to get access to some land to rent from a farmer who then could get that tax credit, this is a great win-win. Here's the application website. It's a short application, like it says here, and it's online. You can, though, email it. You can also mail it in too. So it's very flexible and versatile.
Suzanne, we have a question about the beginning farmer tax credit. Do you know if it's in other states in the Midwest?
I don't. If anyone does know if it is in other states, would you put it in the chat? Because I bet there's people on this webinar that do know if it is in other states. I bet Wisconsin has it. So we'll see if someone can share that information. So that's about renting land. Make sure that you are putting in place some of those agreement pieces and put them on paper, have them in writing. What if you're really wanting to purchase land? Let's say that you have an opportunity to purchase land. Let's say that that's what you want to do. You don't want to rent anymore. You want to purchase. Now, I've attended quite a few informational sessions on this. I've met people who have figured out deals for land. There are ways to do this. So I know it's sometimes hard to figure it out. It's possible to do this. So I just want you to have hope that this can happen. There are ways. So there's some things listed here, like seller financing options. Let's say you've met a farmer. You guys have really hit it off. He or she wants to be done owning land and that they are willing to part with some of their land. You could arrange for incremental sales to happen. You could purchase some each year. You could figure out how to rent some. You could figure out how to purchase some. That's a possibility. There's a thing called a self-directed IRA for agriculture. It's where the ownership person, the person who owns the land, can have an IRA that the younger person then is kind of funding with the purchase of the land. So it's a very complicated and a very structured situation. You'd want to work with an attorney who does know about self-directed IRAs. If you have a situation where you can arrange for a contract for deed, that's also a really great way to purchase a farm. And that would be that you'd have, let's say it's a contract for 10 years, maybe 20 years. You'd have that with the family. It could be with the farmer, and you would pay so much each year. Or you maybe would have a payment every so often. Maybe it's every half year, maybe every 2 years. Real estate markets or auctions, we've talked about that. That's a way. Sometimes you find your land on an auction. If you do purchase land at an auction or through the real estate market, you have to pay for it all up front. At the day of the auction, you have to be prepared to pay for it that day. So you have to have your financing arranged ahead of time. So that's something to be aware of if you are looking for land through an auction or the real estate market. So then we get to financing. How do you make this happen? And I have a few slides here about some resources, so I'll get into that. But the first course of action would be right away. Your bank that you maybe are already dealing with, it could be a bank that you have found out that a lot of farmers work with, so they're used to working with farming. That would be a bank to go to. I have Farm Service Agency on here. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. I've heard of and I've met people who have purchased farms with investors being involved. So that's something too, that as you're getting to know people, you might meet someone who wants to work with you as an investor. So that's an option for you. And all of these things can be put together. They don't have to be an all or nothing. You can maybe have a little bit of some. You could rent some land. You could be purchasing some land. All of these things can be put together. And the last bullet, put a deal together. That's kind of what I mean. You might have a little bit of rental. You might have a little bit of land that you're purchasing, and you work with that for a couple of years, and then you find a new opportunity, and it just kind of goes like that. So one thing I want to mention is about the Farm Service Agency. Keep them in mind, get to know them. Not only for just knowing them in person and being aware of their programs, they can connect you with farms or farmers. It could be that would be a connection point. Here are some of their loan programs. So when you're purchasing land, they have a regular loan program where Farm Service Agency is the lender. They can loan up to $600,000. And that would get you part of the way to some land. So we know that land is expensive, and that could be a part of your your deal that you put together or your financing options. They also have something called the Joint Financing Program. It's where FSA lends up to 50% of the cost of the property being purchased. And then a commercial lender would be a part of the program as well, so that everyone works together to make this deal happen. They also have, Farm Service Agency also has the down payment assistance program. It's called Down Payment Program. It's only eligible for beginner farmers, and minority farmers and women farmers. It's maxed at $300,150, so $300,000, and it does require a cash down payment of 5%. The website is at the bottom of that page. These are things to be aware of as you are kind of looking for land and ways to put together some financing. Also, the Farm Service Agency has another program that's called the microloan program at a maximum of $50,000. This is for it's for farm ownership and operating loans. So this could be for more flexible. It doesn't have to just be for farm ownership. It can also be for operating costs. And that's a microloan program. So that was the USDA Farm Service Agency. Now, this is a program from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and it is a new program. It is the Down Payment Assistance Grant. So the things I talked about a second ago were with Farm Service Agency, and they were loans where you pay it back over time. This is the Down Payment Assistance Grant, and it's a grant. So if you're approved for it for first-time farm buyers, it's up to $15,000 that they will give you as a grant. So the applications are open right now, and it closes on September 15th, and that is coming up pretty soon. So you'd want to keep this in mind. Maybe you have something working right now, you could get an application in. Maybe you want to wait for the next time this opens and keep it in mind as a part of your plan. So that's something for you to keep in contact. If you have any questions, the contact for that is Jenny Heck at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Here are some other resources that are available to you. I've mentioned quite a few of these, but if you are a beginner farmer, it really is a great idea to start connecting yourself and surrounding yourself with resources. So the MDA, which is the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, has emails that they email out, regular updates, so you would get notified about grant opportunities. So if you just search on your search engine, MDA email updates, it'll pop up, and it's a page where you can just sign up for their email updates. We'll send these out as links too after the webinar. So the Minnesota Department of Agriculture has farm advocates where there are staff members who can meet with you as business support one-to-one. There's also through the school of through the two-year colleges across the state, there are farm business management instructors, and that's a great program to be able to get your finances and understand your record keeping. Those are important pieces that are available to farmers. There's the Farm Link line at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, connecting farmers, farmers who own land and people who want to be farmers, connecting people together to find land. And then the Farmland Access Hub. We had talked about that a little bit earlier. That's that nonprofit partnership that a lot of groups that are supporting farming, supporting agriculture, they're trying to connect people who are existing owners of farms with people who want to farm. So that's the Farmland Access Hub. And then don't forget about, there is a program called the Rural Finance Authority Loans. They give low interest farm financing too. Keep in mind, U of M Extension, we have programs that are focused on a lot of the agricultural pieces that we've talked about today. You can always reach out to your county extension office. Every county has an extension office. A lot of them have agriculture educators in them, like Karen and Emily. So keep in mind that you can connect directly with agriculture educators in some of the county extension offices across the state. We do send out a small farms newsletter. So we'll send that link to you as well so that you know how to sign up for that. We do educational programs and sometimes farm tours and webinars. I'm a part of the agricultural business management team, and we do regular programs as well. We do have a women in ag network, and we also have quite a large offering of land rent workshops that are either in person or online. So this is my final question for you guys. I have a few more slides, but this is my question. Do you currently farm or garden? Are you renting? What's your situation? Are you renting currently? Do you own property? Are you looking to own property? Maybe you have a mix of rented and you own some, or are you aspiring to be a farmer? So I thank you for putting things into the chat from before and about the business planning. Now I'm kind of wondering, how are you farming and where are you farming? So thank you. Someone says they're urban farming and that they are owning their farm. Someone else says we're looking at farming. We hope to farm. We do have a plot at our community garden. So keep populating that. I really want to see who we have with us today and what your situations are. Okay, so I'm going to spend a few minutes on property ownership types and also business entities, and then we'll open it up for more questions, or I'll let you go have your supper. So sole ownership, different. Okay, so property ownership is something that you just need to be aware of how your deed might read. So when you do get into the space where you're getting land and you're going to own it, here are the ways you can own the land. So you could be a sole ownership. Sole ownership is you. It's one person. It's the simplest form of ownership. You own the land. It's you. And one person owns the land. So I do a lot of farm transition workshops, and that's why I have this on the slide. When or if you pass away, that land then will go through your will and through probate. So that's something to keep in mind later on. But the thing I want you to remember is that if you own it as a sole owner, that's you. You own it, you as yourself. The ways to own property with someone else, there's a couple of different designations in Minnesota. One of them is tenancy in common. This is the most common way to own land in Minnesota. So it's two or more people who own property together, okay? It's equal shares, or it could be unequal shares. You could own half of it and the other person owns half. Maybe it's a brother and a sister. They have gone in on some property and they own it together. Maybe the sister put in, a third and the brother put in 2/3. And so they own it in that type of a share. That's possible. The thing that you need to know in tenancy in common, upon the death of one of the owners of the land, that person's portion of the property goes through the estate. Whatever the will says, then that would be the new owner with the other owner. So let's say that me and my brother owned land as tenants in common. Let's say that I die, it goes through my will, and maybe I left it to my daughter. So then he owns the property then with my daughter. That's tenants in common. Joint tenancy is a second way as a designation for owning land. Joint tenancy is property owned by one or more people. It can be multiple. You can have 4 people own land or whatever number. This is something, if your deed does not say anything, then it's the other. It's tenants in common. you have to have this designation added to your deed if you want it to be. The benefit of having joint tenants, it needs to say joint tenants with rights of survivorship, is that when or if one of the owners dies, the ownership passes to the surviving owner. So in the case of my brother and me owning land, we would be joint tenants. If I passed away, then he would own that land fully. So it's not subject to the will. It just goes right over to that person, and that's the benefit. So for spouses, joint tenancy is really nice because then it doesn't have to go through the will, things like that. So I just wanted to mention property ownership so that when you get to the point, if you're looking at some property, you can choose which kind of designation you have. And joint tenancy to me has a benefit because it's an automatic thing instead of it having to go through a person's will than to designate upon a death. So that's the only reason.
We do have some questions.
Okay, I figured that would bring up some questions.
So the first one is, what about sole ownership with transfer on death?
Yes, so that's what I'm going to get at on this slide. There are some designations that you can put. You can go to your county land department and you can add it onto your deed so that if you put that piece of paper, you've put that designation, transfer on death is the second bullet at the bottom of the page. That tells, well, that's actually for an investment account. Actually, the transfer on death deed would be for real estate. And that is, it tells the court, hey, I've already designated who I want to have my land. It doesn't have to go through the will. It doesn't have to go through probate at that time. So if you have added on this designation of transfer on death deed, then it just tells the court, we don't even need to take any action, and it's just going to go right to that person. And then that person needs to just bring the death certificate to the county courthouse and to the land department and get the new deed so that it just has their name on it. So that's possible. I think it's important for all of you to know about these designations because they're an important piece that a lot of people don't know about. Designations are something you can add onto your checking account or your savings account, your investment accounts, and they all then just tell upon your death, whoever's handling your estate, that was your wish, and then that it just goes right to that next person instead of having to go through your estate with the will and probate. What other questions, Emily?
The next question, I mean, really depends on the person's situation, but they asked, what is easier, owning a regular house or a land with farmland? And what is more beneficial?
Well, I think you're right. That's subjective to each person. Owning a house or owning farmland. Do you think that, how should we read that question? I'm not sure.
I'm
Owning.
not sure either. It really depends, I guess, on people's situation. If they already own a house, but they need extra land that isn't provided at the house that they own. I get there's so many different situations that are running through my head, I guess, with that
Well,
one.
and also I would say too that sometimes you run into a situation where if you are looking at purchasing land from a farmer, that might also have a homestead on it. It might have a house. So in that case, you might not really want that house. You just want the farmland. So I can see that that would be a detriment. But yet, if you have a family member who could really use that house, then it's a benefit. So yeah,
Right.
what other question?
That is all of them.
Okay, good. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that I touched on these designations. This is a part of our other work that we do, which is farm management succession and farm transfer planning. So we know that a person who owns land, they have to think about all these different things. If you own assets of any sort, if you have a checking account, you can use this payable on death designation, and you can have your checking account just transferred directly to whoever you've designated. So that's kind of a nice situation. So keep these things in mind. There are options that you can research and look into. So we have a few minutes left. I just want to quickly cover business entity types. So as you get into your farming operation, you might want to think about the different structures that are available in Minnesota as businesses. So you can do no formalized structure, and I'll talk about that first. So sole proprietorship, if you are farming, if you're selling vegetables from, let's say you have an urban spot and you're farming at that spot, you take them to the farmer's market, you're most likely a sole proprietor. You're just selling the food that you're producing, and that's you selling it. This is a sole proprietorship, and that's the most common way farmers are as a business designation. They're sole proprietorship. So if you're filing a Schedule F and it's just your name on the top, then you're most likely a sole proprietorship. That's a great way if you're thinking about getting into farming. You can start farming with someone else just by starting to work on their farm. So it's a sole proprietorship and no special ways to have to get into the business or anything like that. Then there's also partnerships. So it could be that a brother and a sister, they farm together. They're doing, let's say they're raising goats and they're raising hay. Sometimes they sell hay to others. They could be a partnership. So you could just be in a general partnership working together. It's really two sole proprietors working together in this farming business. You don't have to do any paperwork. You're just working together. There are other designations. It's called a general partnership and a limited liability partnership. Those two partnerships, you can do a little bit of paperwork with Minnesota State to kind of acknowledge that you're in business as a farming operation. So it really doesn't give you any extra protection. It just acknowledges that you're in business together. So the limited liability partnership is quite similar to that. This has a little bit more structure to it. There are some forms on the Minnesota Secretary of State's website that you can fill out, optional. You don't have to fill it out. It's a partnership. You're working together on a farm. Let's say my brother and I want to kind of be a little bit more formalized. The reason to do a limited liability company might be, let's say you're farming, but you're also having people out on your farm. Let's say that you are inviting people in for some sort of agritourism aspect. Maybe you host weddings at your venue. You'll have a lot of people at your farm. If someone trips, a limited liability company gives you a little liability protection. You file your paperwork with the Secretary of State, designating your farm as a limited liability company. And then because you've gone through that extra work, it's separate from you. Your limited liability company is the one that would be your farm name. It would be, let's say you have a wedding there and someone trips. If you're a sole proprietor, if they broke their leg and they were going to sue you, maybe they would sue you as a sole proprietor. If you were in a limited liability company, they would sue the company instead of you. So there's a little bit of separation. And that's comfortable for some people, but it's not necessary for most farmers. So I just wanted to mention these business entities that are options for you in Minnesota. We also have a few farms in Minnesota that are corporations. There's two designations. You could be an S or a C corporation. Most likely, this isn't going to be something that you're looking at until maybe later on down the road. But there are tax advantages for being a corporation, and that liability piece too is there. That corporation is the farm and separate from you as the farmer. So those are things that I wanted to make sure that you are aware of. These offer sometimes ways for people to enter into the business. If there is a corporation as a farm, you could enter as a staff member or even a partner. You could start buying into that farm incrementally a little bit along the way, and you would be a part of that corporation or that limited liability company. So those are things for you to keep in mind. It's 7 o'clock. I want to make sure that I respect your time. I want to just make sure that we say, keep in mind as you are starting on your journey for owning a farm, record keeping is super important because it establishes that you have been farming for a long time. Even if you're gardening at home, start keeping records. I really encourage you to do that. Are there any last questions that we can answer, Emily?
None right now in the chat.
Okay.
Maybe we'll get some in.
I encourage you to reach out to us as we email you with resources afterwards. Happy to include my contact information, and then I can include Karen and Emily's too.
We also have a survey. So once you leave this webinar, it should pop up in your online browser, and it's just a 5-question survey. So pretty quick and easy. But if you don't get it, there should be a link to the survey in the follow-up email tomorrow. And we really appreciate your feedback in the survey. We really do use the feedback for future programs to make this better. And if no one has any other questions.
And I'll say, Emily, you might be emailing them tomorrow, but I know it takes us a couple of days to get the video up onto YouTube. So that email won't come until midweek next week.
Yep. And I'll
Okay.
send that out to everyone. So I think you all should have my email anyways from the Zoom email that it sends out. So just be on the lookout for that. Sometimes it does go into spam too. And then follow the ABM team on YouTube.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Appreciate it.